Mark.
Hey, morning, Jer. What you
Morning.
got? What's making news out there?
Yeah, totally. So we're working on these conversations, Mark and I are. We've got kind of a couple of them here and there, but it's still kind of evolving. So in case people have not tuned in before, I just want to recap. We are looking at the news, sometimes the news, specifically the health news, stuff that's floating around either on morning TV news or Google Health search, Google News Health. And we're looking into that and thinking often when we have conversations thinking, you know, there's got to be more to that, or what's maybe, what would be the take from this angle on that same story, those kinds of things. And we had enough of those conversations that we decided to start recording them, see if they're interesting, and we hope they're interesting. And if people do find them interesting, we'll keep doing it. We'll keep putting them up there. So anyway, let's chat. We looked at the Google Health News recently, passed some headlines around, as well as some other places. Of course, this time of year, New Year's resolution time, there's a lot of diet and fitness articles specifically. And in particular, specifically, we found one article that looks at a bunch of different diet types and then ranked them. Mark, what did that end up looking like?
Well, the article you're referring to is Mediterranean is the best way to eat in 2019, according to new diet rankings. And just to recap what a Mediterranean diet is, as a modern definition, for the research purposes, this is a diet that focuses on fruits and vegetables, as you might expect, but also healthy fats and lean meats like fish. And this is really considered to be the best way to go for most people in 2019, as vetted by Dr. Katz and a bunch of other prominent doctors. Dr. Katz is the founding director of Yale University's Prevention Research Center, and they ranked 41 different diets. And the Mediterranean diet comes out on top, essentially because it embraces more plant-based foods and healthier oils like olive oil, and healthy protein sources such as low mercury cold water fish, and as well as you know, good sources of fiber, for most people, whole grains. So you know, it's really, there's a lot of good research on the Mediterranean diet. You really can't knock it as a well-rounded way of maximizing longevity, living long, living well. There are some caveats to it. I'll get into in a minute, but what I like about the Mediterranean diet is the same thing that Dr. Katz likes about it, and that is, it's a really nice example, quote unquote, I'm quoting him now, it's a really nice example of the potential to love food that loves you back. And I think it's got to, I mean, everybody likes Italian food and maybe some Mediterranean food, but most of the time we're thinking about that in terms of piles of pasta and lots of marinara sauce. That's not necessarily what we're talking about here. We're talking about a Mediterranean diet, which includes the whole Fertile Crescent area, as well as Greece and you know, so you've got Greece and Italy and the rest of the Fertile Crescent area there. And so it's really focusing more on whole foods, fruits and vegetables, healthy fats, lean meats. And there's a lot of controversy out there right now about what is a healthy fat, and we can maybe get into that. But essentially, it is a good diet for you know, to love food that loves you back, because it is pretty tasty, and it's not low fat. And so it's not one of those diets that's going to remove a lot of flavor factors. In fact, it's flavor packed. So it's easy to use. It's also not calorie restrictive. It's more about the quality of food rather than the quantity of food. And in most cases, when the quality of food gets high enough, oftentimes that will auto regulate people's appetites. So that
Right,
they're not
it's rich, you don't use much.
cravings because they're actually malnourished. They're not getting enough micronutrients because they're really not eating enough real food. They're eating too much processed food, which is highly palatable and lots of salt, sugar, and unhealthy fats that drives craving centers of the brain, but doesn't really feed you the nutrients you need. So really any diet, any whole food diet is going to be a massive improvement on the standard American diet. And as long as the quality improves, a lot of times issues with appetite will auto-regulate over time. It's not going to be the best way to lose weight fast because it's not restrictive, but it's probably the best way to change and get on a new footing for life, which I think
Right.
is really underrated for people, especially this time of year, because what we have is this idea of, okay, I'm going to get my shaisa together and I'm going to get all this weight loss in a really short period of time, and I'm going to get ready for spring break,
Yeah.
and do all this in 90 days. I'm going to get my ideal body in 90 days, and that's going to be it. And usually the amount of focus and restriction and discipline that takes is generally not sustainable for most people. And so what happens is they fall off the wagon,
Yeah.
and not only do they gain a lot of the weight back, but they also lose confidence in themselves and start to hate themselves because they feel like, hey, you know, I can't keep my commitments. But maybe you have to evaluate those commitments to begin with. So starting with a really sensible diet that's a lifestyle change that you're committed to for the entire year and your entire life is probably a better New Year's resolution than some Hail Mary approach.
Right.
Probably, most definitely, I would say.
Yeah.
But it will not have you lose weight quite as fast as a restrictive diet. That's true.
Yeah.
And that's why people keep falling for restrictive diets.
Yeah, they
Low
want
fat or low calorie, like those are attractive because they get results quickly. But I think the stats are on those is 95% of people on restrictive diets eventually fail, which i.e. they can't keep the weight off. They can lose the weight.
Yeah.
And so, you know, why bother is my take on that.
Yeah, well, I've heard that in other contexts too. I think it's about maybe the gym. So it falls in the same category. But basically, that if you want to make the fastest way to make gains is slowly, something like that. Some play on words, but basically saying like, if you do them slow over time, that ultimately will be your quickest return. Because if you do stop stuff, it just doesn't progress ever.
Exactly. And you know, that's probably true for just about anything in life. Start stopping in business. I mean, momentum is its own strategy. If you're constantly losing momentum because of a start-stop mentality, that's just so demoralizing. So don't do that to yourself, no matter what branch, no matter what type of achievement you're going after.
Yeah.
You know, pacing yourself and taking time for joy.
It goes all the way back to Aesop's fables with the tortoise and the hare. That's like an old idea, I guess.
Yep. So I think what's now I'd like to kind of look at some nuances going forward here, because you know the Mediterranean diet does emphasize whole grains, and I think that's, you know, fine in a non-discriminatory fashion for most people. But there are people, particularly maybe who are struggling with cognitive decline issues, who have gut permeability issues and gut barrier function issues. And those people are not going to do well with a lot of the grain-based ways of eating out there. And I don't have time to go into all the science on that because we want to keep this fairly short. But if you want more information on that with robust science, you can look at the work of Dr. Alessio Fasano. He's an Italian gastroenterologist who used to love his pasta, but has found that, you know, that gluten is not actually broken down completely by any human being. We don't have the machinery to do that. And you can get away with that if you have adequate mucus production, adequate barrier function. But if there are some reasons why that barrier function is deteriorated, antibiotics, chronic stress, or some other reason, now you're going to get these partially digested snippets of gluten, and they do open up the channels in the gut and make it leakier, which then sets you up for inflammation and autoimmunity, because now your immune system is seeing molecules it doesn't want to see because they're leaking through in full. So that's a very brief explanation. This happens to anyone who has compromised barrier function and is eating foods that aggravate that compromised barrier function and create leaky gut. And some of the grains out there, particularly wheat-based or gluten-containing grains, do this in all human beings under certain circumstances. And another great book to read on this and how it falls out, checks out with cognitive function is The End of Alzheimer's by Dr. Dale Bredesen. So so what we're finding then is diets that are geared towards maximizing cognitive function and particularly cognitive recovery. So patients who already had some cognitive decline and want recovery, these are diets that look an awful lot like the Mediterranean diet, except they exclude gluten-containing grains and they exclude dairy, another inflammatory food for many people. But they do focus on the fresh fruits and vegetables and the healthy fats, because it turns out a lot of people struggling with cognitive decline have the ApoE4 gene and are amplifiers of the effect of saturated fat. So a diet that is lower in saturated fats is actually better for them, even though saturated fat has been exonerated for other genotypes for the most part. So this fruit and veggie heavy diet with healthy fats, lean meats, particularly fish, low mercury fish, and those are the smash fish, SAMASH. So salmon, mackerel, anchovies, sardines, and herring. These provide, so that's your acronym SMASH. That's how you remember which fish that you should be eating a lot of. So they're not only low mercury, but they're high in DHA fat, and which is particularly helpful for the brain, which is one of the reasons I think I think it's one of the secret weapons of the Mediterranean diet is the DHA that's coming from the fish, cold water fish, low mercury cold water fish, and then the cardiovascular benefits that you're getting from the healthy doses of olive oil, which are monounsaturated fats and raise your HDL, your good cholesterol, and you've got all of these incredible polyphenols that come with high quality olive oil that decrease inflammation. So these are some reasons, and then you've got your fruits and veggies, which have their own phytonutrient profiles as well. So good diet. I would recommend some tweaks for people who are struggling with cognitive decline. Also, for people who are already sliding down into autoimmunity with lots of joint issues and pain, removing nightshades is something to experiment with, because those can really, in the setting of autoimmunity and leaky gut, nightshades can be a real issue for some people in general, and as a pain generator. Nightshades are tomatoes, potatoes, red peppers, so not black pepper, but the pepper family, the tomatoes, potatoes, peppers, and eggplant. And a lot of those show up in modern Mediterranean cuisine, and I emphasize modern because these are all new world foods. These all came from the Americas, all of these foods.
Interesting. So those are all.
They were actually not part of the Mediterranean diet prior to Christopher Columbus sailing the ocean blue, coming back in 1493. So he went in 1492, comes back in 1493 with some of the first New World plants that then become enrolled into the cuisine of Europeans. But so for the vast majority of European history and genomic adaptation of Northern Europeans and even Southern Europeans, these foods were actually not part of the cuisine. So it's not surprising to me that many Europeans particularly have autoimmune issues that are aggravated by these particular groupings of foods. I don't think we've had quite enough time to adapt to them. I think if you have a really healthy gut, you're okay. But that's a big assumption these days, because we live in a sea of things that make our gut unhealthy. We're taking way too many antibiotics. We're stripping out our microbiome. A lot of the chemicals in the foods, even glyphosate-drenched foods, so foods that have been raised on Roundup. Those also denude the microbiome. Roundup is not a human poison, but it's a microbiome poison. And so when you lose your microbial friends, you're losing a lot.
Yeah, we don't even know really.
Yeah, so glyphosate is a big problem from that standpoint alone. It has other issues. But anyway, so what's interesting is if you looked at the way these diets were ranked, the MIND diet came in number 4, and the MIND diet is a little closer to what I was describing for the Bredesen protocol, which removes some of the inflammatory aspects of the Mediterranean diet for people with gut dysfunction. And so what I think is interesting about that is the MIND diet is ranked number 4, but Alzheimer's kills as many people each year as cancer and heart disease. And I think the reason it's ranked lower than the Mediterranean diet standard is because the Mediterranean diet without any restrictions is easier to follow. And because there is still a persistent idea that once you have Alzheimer's, there's nothing you can do about it, diet or not. And, you know, if you've read the end of Alzheimer's and Dr. Dale Bredesen's work, you realize that that is actually not true, that there is a programmatics approach. And one piece of that program is diet that can actually roll back the effects of Alzheimer's. So in a perfect world, when you've got something, you know, you've got a disease like Alzheimer's that's killing as many people as cancer and heart disease, and you've got a way to deal with it now, and part of it involves diet, I would be ranking MIND diet neck and neck with any other diet.
Right.
Okay. Yeah. So that's my take on things.
Yeah.
I think that's all I have to say about this article.
Yeah, no, that was a lot. That's good. It's always comes up this time of year. Yeah, so then I think that pretty much, I think, makes a good little bit. So maybe we can wrap it up there. We got a few others here that we can save for another time.
Sounds good.
Yeah, so yeah, let's do that. Thanks a lot, Mark.
Thanks, Jer. We'll do it again next Monday.
All right. Bye.
Bye-bye.